What's up, Digidestins? This is Kyle D, better known as RideMyAvatar, and today we're going to shed on some light for none other than BT-16 being a Zerber competitive tier list. So, without further ado, let's get into the video, talk about all the goodies and what I'm excited for. We have plenty of decks to go over, and there's a lot to talk about. First off, Jessamon. Jessamon didn't really get any crazy support this set, but with the inclusion of Magnamon X, the deck actually gains a new tool, and I think it's still a good gatekeeper deck. It is definitely one of those contenders that can surprise players, and if you're very confident and know what you're doing with them, the deck can be explosively good. As long as you open the nuts, sometimes it's always good. Then we do have Venusmon here. Venusmon represents yellow vaccine a little bit more. I like that we do have access to multitude of yellow vaccine styles, but Venusmon, definitely a good gatekeeper style of play. Just yellow vaccine in general plays it. Then we do have Bloomlord. Bloomlord's definitely a good gatekeeper. It's not tier 1 as it used to be, just because what's coming forwards doesn't care what Bloomlord does. It kind of falls flat a little bit. I think we're getting into a style where Bloomlord can definitely handle the tier 2s, but Bloomlord just can't keep up with the tier 1s anymore. I think the new tier 1s are just a little more power, and they're just a lot scarier. Phoenixmon definitely got some great support in the X lineup, and I think we're gonna say it's a tier 2 deck as well. I think with Phoenixmon X just giving the support it needs in every way, shape, or form, I think the deck can just do what it needs to do, and it's a little more combo. Marsmon, definitely a dead deck. It needs support. It needs some love. It just does not have it at this point. Mirage doesn't give a flip about what any other deck does in the tier 1 category. I think Mirage is still a contender for tier 1 status. It still has a good amount of tops. It is able to OTK out of left field, make your opponent just regret ever existing. With the OTK potential of this, I think at the end of the day, it's going to still hold up a lot of slots in the tier 1, just because even Magnamon X can't stand up to this deck. Just stuff like that matters. Digimon here, it just needs better support at this point. There's nothing too crazy what it does. It just spits bodies out. It's one of those fewer decks. I feel bad for Justimon. Justimon's definitely a dead deck. I think once it gets in an advanced deck of some sort, the deck will definitely move into tier 2, tier 1 category. But right now, the deck can do some shenanigans, but the amount of time it needs to set up is still ridiculously long. It needs some love. Let's go with Black War Greymon. I think Black War Greymon is still a deck. It definitely does some stuff in tier 2 a little bit, but a lot of the decks now have more protective skills, more things that just say, I don't care what you're doing with Black War Grey anymore, and just get around it. And I think that's the biggest disappointment here, is that it struggles that way. Then we have Mervamon. This is similar to what we were expecting to see with decks of purple. I mean, this thing can still do things with Leviathan and everything like that. It's not anywhere near tier 2. It's definitely a tier 3 category deck. Galacticmon, definitely waiting to see what it can do. I mean, the promo definitely did something, but it needs a new wave of support at this point just to keep up, and a lot of decks just get around it. Emperor Greymon. Actually, Emperor is definitely a tier 2 deck right now. I would almost say it's close to tier 1. Actually, I would say it's tier 1 even still, just because even though Magna is going to be its worst matchup, and yellow vaccine version Magna might be its worst matchup, the deck still is going to present some tops. The deck is what it does. I mean, being able to promote up and everything like that, I think is pretty solid. You know, it has access to both Fukus now, and it's gonna just go burr. The thing, I'm gonna say this right now, that this thing's gonna dip down and probably go to tier 2 if the meta shifts to more heavy hate to the Uku engines. If that happens, Emperor does fall down a lot more because of that. Just because decks are starting to tech in for the anti-hate, all that good stuff there is going to bring this deck down to tier 2 very quickly. If the meta doesn't play Emperors as much, then this deck definitely can go off. Gallantmon's just tier 3 at this point. It does stuff. it will do stuff it can handle into the tier 2s, but the way it's going to be able to, it can't handle the tier 1 as often as it likes to. It kind of just plays nicely into tier 2. If it can't play well into tier 1, I think I'm going to move things into, you know, tier 3. It's just how that goes. All Force, when it pops off, it goes. I mean, as long as you can get to arena as soon as possible, definitely can put in some results. Good for locals, anything like that. We're going to skip this one because I have a later version coming up. Shine Greymon, definitely really solid. Marcus Punchy Boy is really good. I would put it into tier 1 category, but the fact that it doesn't stop Magna is what is holding it back. I think because it needs to check into Magna being able to redirect sometimes or doesn't care about the minusing DP effects really makes it struggle going into it. And even now, Shine isn't putting as much results compared to Mirage or Emperor. That's kind of where it's going to go. Chaos Dramon, under the right pilot, it's definitely still a good tier 2 deck. It really is. It's not putting in many results because at the end of the day, it's a skill level deck. This deck, it's right calls. What are you trashing? What do you need to play? What you need to do? What chain of line do I need to get up there to do all I need to be able to survive? That is the biggest counterpoint here for the Chaos Mugen deck, and that is it is a skill level deck. When it has a high skill set and it punishes you for making the wrong plays, that is what makes it turn off from players from playing it. Only very skilled pilots actually take these decks on. Then we do have the Evil Hunters. It just needs some better support. I know that you can do the whole shenanigans with Quartz and get it on board, but Quartz isn't answering anything anymore as much as it used to. Stuff like that is going to be vitally important. Then we do have, you know, Hunters. Hunters is actually still pretty solid and meta relevant because of the deck's playstyle. It still can get tops, and it still shows that it tops even in JP's format and even in ours occasionally. On the local level, it definitely does well, and we'll have to see. Beelzemon X is definitely a tier 2 deck. When this thing high rolls, it high rolls. There is nothing you can do to stop it. But at the same time, when it starts speaking into the tier 1 category, I think that's the biggest issue, is that if it doesn't, it can definitely go into Mirage or Emperor very cleanly and just go off. I think there's nothing to be really afraid of there. But when you take that into account, once it starts getting to Magna territory and stuff like that, I think it just struggles a little bit because of the way it can't get that lethal in, and because you can't just pop out the Magna X. Once they get a couple Magna X's on board, Beelzemon can't cleanly win the game. Then we do have Bagra Army, good, but needs some more support. I love that it has good interaction and it does something on your opponent's turn, which is really huge. A Crossheart, at this point, it's still a good tier 3 deck. It can still take in with the tier 2 decks without even batting an eye. But when it starts getting closer to tier 1s, the tier 1s are just a little bit faster because the Uku engines, or Mirage just being faster, or the Magnas just being what Magna wants to do. Royal Knights, I think Royal Knights is still pretty solid. I think Royal Knights has potential to be able to handle a lot of stuff, but it's definitely a tier 3 deck in my classification. It handles tier 2 well. I just don't think it handles tier 1 as well as it should, and that is the biggest disappointment, is that, you know, Royal Knights is a very powerhouse deck. The way it wants to play its style of play, nothing wrong with it. It needs some TLC a little bit more, just a bit more new support, and it could definitely go off. A Kentorismon, definitely a dead deck. It does nothing in the format. It's just helping your opponent a little bit more and more, and that's just the biggest problem here. Then the chess deck, good, but it just definitely needs a little bit more support, in my opinion, for it to really pop off. Balphamon, sleep mode, definitely a gatekeeper. This thing holds up with the meta. It is a tier 2 deck without a doubt. This thing also gained access to 2 more Uku, the new Uku line as well. Balphamon just really can go off. Now let's get into the first one. This Pata represents the Magna Rappa deck, Yellow Vaccine. Don't get me wrong, the deck has a lot of angles and stuff like that. Being able to, Emissary of Hope, get from your Magnamon, into another one, or you go rapid in emissary into another rapid. Really scary, and especially because you do have access to their, minusing DP effect. You can get into Magnamon X antibody without batting an eye. It's got a lot of potential. It's one of those decks that really sets tier 1 status right now. You just have to combo that out. Then we have the Seraphimon Patamon build. I think it's pretty solid. It's definitely a yellow vaccine version. It's does what it wants to do. I have no objections here. Rosemon, just plain Rosemon is just good, but definitely needs some more support at this point. Leomon just needs a little more TLC just for Saber Leomon shenanigans. D-Brigade definitely got some support. The fact that we're walking into a field with Rappa in it, though, definitely hurts it a little bit. I think it handles a little bit more. I'm gonna say it's good, but needs some more support. That new support speeds it up a little bit, but it definitely is like tier 3 category-ish, just because you can take it to locals. It'll handle the tier 2s well. You might be able to pop off a little bit against the tier 1s under the right circumstances, but it will still struggle just a tad bit. Fenry, Luga, definitely a tier 2 deck. The new support is really solid, but once it gets to take a Mizuchi, I definitely think it moves right into tier 1 with no questions asked. War Greymon, definitely looking like a tier 2 deck yet again. It's just really strong. It can do some shenanigans. It can definitely hit into Magna under the right circumstances, and it can just keep up with the rest. I just think it definitely needs another wave of support of something, or maybe just being able to evolve a little bit quicker. Then we have Plesiommon, Source Stripping, good, but I think you just give it better support at this point. It can get some sneaky tops in, but it's just under locals level. I don't see this thing taking into it a big event like a regionals or something. Then we do have the yellow vaccine version with all the goodies. And what do I mean by all the goodies? The yellow vaccines, I mean with the Gatos, you got the Minitamamon, stuff like that's just really important. Definitely a tier 2 deck. We got Mega Kabuterimon. Mega Kabuterimon's really solid. The bug deck definitely got a little bit more support. I feel like it's nothing grand right now. I think if you're just focusing on Mega Kabuterimon going into Hercules Kabuterimon, it's good. It definitely needs some more, but the other version you want to be playing is later in this list. Rosemon X is definitely solid deck. It just needs a bit more. Then we have Nume. Numemon is definitely a tier 1 deck. It is the antithesis of an annoying threat. The fact that it can handle going into armors very easily, just because of the blanket effect of minusing DP. Magna X can just be popped by the start of their next turn. So you just hammer on minusing DP effects. And with Valkyrie Ace coming in, this deck now has a great powerhouse in the shape of Valkyrie Ace that'll be able to minus the board with 5000 DP, and this will punish even in the mirror match. It becomes a rush to who gets into Valkyrie Ace first, all that goodies. Then we do have Oriumon. Oriumon Digipolice is definitely the bet. It's definitely good, but definitely needs some more. I feel like they're both synergistic with Commandramon and everything like that. We do have Metal Guru. Metal Garurumon can definitely do some shenanigans, but I think it does well into the tier 2s. Once you start getting to the tier 1s, you're kind of struggling a little bit with Metal Guru. Those hits really hurt the deck to no beliefs. I think the speed the deck had just flopped. Then we do have Gato Armor. Gato Armor is pretty interesting to me. I feel like I want to put it close to tier 2, but right now it needs some more testing and more fine tuning, but the deck can go off. We're going to say good, but definitely needs some more support. The Hawkmon Valkyrie Ace deck, definitely good. I wouldn't scream tier 2. Maybe we'll go tier 3. It definitely plays into tier 2 really well, but once it starts getting to tier 1 category, it gets a little scary for it. Then we do have the Goldramon X antibody. What is it called? 3, the Trials of the 4 Great Dragons. I think it's just needs some better support. It didn't really do anything that it needed to. Vikemon, Shokotomon. This thing is just give it better support. The deck had a few tops over it. I think it's decent, but right now it just doesn't have the support it needs. Imperial Dramon, I think if Imperial Dramon goes off, it is definitely a crazy strong deck. Once it goes off, it goes off. But right now, I think it's a tier 2 deck. It's good. It can handle the tier 1s a little bit. I think once we get Paladin mode and the option that protects it, it is scary. It is what you fear. A Tyrant Kabuterimon. The Tyrant is definitely a tier 1 deck. This deck can just not care about the patas. The deck has ways of removal. It's just a beefy body that just doesn't care. And with protection skills mattering more and more, it starts looking at it here. Then we do have Dorugoromon. This one is focusing on the collision. I think it's definitely a tier 2 deck. It can play into the tier 1s, but sometimes the tier 1s will just get over it. I think the problem comes down to it needs that next wave of support for it to actually move up to meeting the family here. But right now, definitely a solid tier 2 deck. It can go and deal with threats. You know, it gets that power boost level to the point where it doesn't care about Magna. It can get it de-digivolve it. Stuff like that matters. A Pulsemon, we're gonna go give it some better support. The deck, actually, to be even straight honest with you, it never topped first place. It got a few tops in the second place categories and stuff like that, but it's definitely a dead deck. Once it gets the Tekamizuchi and the Pulsemon new line from it, I definitely think it could move into tier 2 category. But right now, definitely a dead deck. Malamyotismon with Venomyotismon combo. The option is just broken. I think it's good. It's tier 3, definitely. It can go off, and when it goes off, it's a big threat to deal with. But right now, I think it just needs some TLC. Rapid Boy. This is just your dog bunny deck. You know, Golden Rappa, Mega Gargo is just going to be played in this deck. No questions asked. I think it's a very powerhouse deck. And with that, you kind of just have, this thing deals with wide boards, little boards really easily. Then you do have Magna X Armor. I think Magna X Armor is just a lot better than the yellow vaccine version. But right now, I think these are our big 3 right here and now. Just keep that in mind. Lilith Loop, definitely a tier 2 deck. Just milling out your opponent is just annoying, and a lot of players just can't handle that sometimes. Ancient Greymon, good. It can OTK if your opponent lets you, but actually we're gonna move it to 4. It needs some better support, to be honest with you. Omnizoo is good, but at this point, you do not want to give this much memory to any of these boys here. They're just gonna take a walk with you. Then we do have Bonds of Bravery, dead deck. It just doesn't do anything. The new Uka support with Bonds of Friendship, though, on the other hand, definitely is a gatekeeper. It can play into the tier 2s really decently, and it can get underneath the tier 1s because if it goes off, it's fast enough to handle the tier 1s and just get in those extra attacks before your opponent even knows it. Bellastar, definitely a good, but needs more. To be honest with you, it's just not doing much into the tier 2s. Actually, I would put it in tier 4 at this point. Just gives it better support. The new support that it's getting in the future, oh my god, Chef's Kiss. That's exactly what it needs to move back into the higher categories. But right now, it's definitely just a tier 4 deck. Blue Hybrid can do some shenanigans, especially because it started proving that it could once the restrictions happened in this format. I'm gonna say good, but definitely needs some more love. Yellow, this one is the Angemon deck. Angelwomon with Angelwomon X. You know the drill. It's a good deck. It could be, you just need some better support at this point. We're gonna skip this one because we already have it on the board. I forgot to remove that. Grandis OTK. Grandis got some new support with Tyrant and everything like that. I think it moves back into tier 2 category at that point. Okay, now let's talk about this one. This one is what I want to talk about. You know there's Dorugray, right? The Dorugamon line. Well, Dorugamon X Antibody is another optional way to play the deck. They're kind of 2 separate entities. One focuses solely on trying to get into Dex Doruga, while the other one's focusing more on the collision support and using other crazy shenanigans to go off. I think they're both really solid decks and they're both very powerful, and it's just a preference of playstyle at that point. Mastemon, just taking a look here, good, but definitely needs, just give it better support at this point. And once it gets the ace stuff, it's really solid. Alphamon with the new support is a little fun to play. It can do some crazy shenanigans. Just keep that on your radar. D-Reaper is actually a good, but definitely needs more. Can play into the tier 2s without batting an eye. The fact that you can use, right, the promo that came out that is for Ragnar Lord, getting that underneath is really important. It speeds up the clock and it's pretty solid. Doro Brick, definitely good, but needs some more support at this point. The Fishy deck is kind of dead here, just doesn't do anything. Trial of the Four Greats, we already talked about this deck earlier, we're not going to bring it back up. Then we do have Dragon Links. I definitely say it's a dead deck here. A classic D Brigade we already have on the list with the new support. Examon can definitely do some shenanigans. I think it's a tier 3 deck still. It can play into the tier 2s a little bit. Tier 3s, force it before the protections. It can go into the tier 1s. It can definitely handle the Magna a little bit. I think it needs too much setup for it to handle itself. We're not talking about this one. Chaos Gallant, you know the drill here. Just give it better support at this point. We do have Blue Flare. Blue Flare still can rush and get under things. I think it's definitely a tier 2. This is the Gray's Knightsmon, and just get it out of here. So Kuyamon's good, definitely needs a bit more at this point, which is nothing wrong with that. I think we have another Dog Bunny version. We already kind of talked about it up here, but if you weren't focusing on the Rapid, you can still play the Dog Bunny deck pretty solidly here. I think it's tier 2, especially because some people might not be able to afford this. Taking in the account that Rapidmon X is going to be quite expensive for a lot of players. If you guys are just going to focus on just this, you know, Mega Gargo stuff, that's just your default here. Alter S, shenanigans, give it better support at this point. Dark Knightmon, tier 3, it does its shenanigans. Gaiomon is definitely with, you know, our good friend Black War Greymon X antibody. Setcon, oh, our good friend Setcon. Setcon is just going to do things. Setcon just plays really well into the tier 2s a little bit, and it can handle a little bit of the tier 1s as long as you have the right option at the right time. That's gonna matter. Bravemon, good, but definitely needs a bit. Actually, let's be straight honest, Bravemon hasn't done anything. Dead deck. We do have Cherubi Alliance, definitely a dead deck. Leopardmon is still shenanigan bananas here. I think this thing is just really solid tier 2. It just does what it wants to do, and without even breaking a sweat. Metal Edamon, definitely good, needs some more support. It can get people by surprise, but that's about it. Heavy Leo, I think is still a solid tier 2, but like I said, tier 3 is where, if it can only handle the tier 2s well, tier 1 is where it kind of struggles a lot, and it proves that from time to time. Anubis on the one shenanigans here. Definitely give it some better support. Anubis disappeared off the face of the earth. Then we do have Levia. I think Levia is pretty solid. It does well into these tier 1s, but then once you start getting into Magna territory, Levia kind of starts falling apart a little bit. Since it can handle half the board here on the top end, and it can contend with them and get some wins off of them, I don't think it counters them well enough, but Levia is a solid option. Grace Nova definitely got the support it needed. I want to put it, you know, magically I would love to put it here just because it's one of my favorite decks, but realistically it sneaks some tops here and there because the consistency engine is there. It's good. It definitely plays into the tier 2 category quite well, but once you start getting into the tier 1s, I think the deck starts struggling a little bit. It's a very much open the right thing at the right time or you're screwed. Fang Long has 2 versions. There's a purple base and a regular base. I think both are really solid contenders and just really good. I think in tier 2, they go off pretty well enough. Fang Long, under the right circumstances, can deal with a lot of these decks. Magna is the only problem that it's probably going to run into, and Magnamon X antibody just as long as their protection skill goes off, you're kind of in a bad spot. OTK Black War Gray, kind of good still, just not doing as much. This deck here, they got the new support in the Dino Bee and the Davis. It's good, but definitely needs some more support. It can pop off in the tier 2 category, but once you start getting the tier 1s, it's not fast enough. Morphomon, definitely a dead deck. Rusty Tyranno, Rusty is just not doing anything, to be honest with you. Diaboromon Ace, dead deck at this point. Nothing against it. I think it's still very much a awesome deck. It just needs that next wave of support at this point. Uku deck theme. We have big Uku coming in, and we just have Uku themes in general. If your deck is trying to splash Uku, sometimes Uku just, the low end Uku decks, just focusing going to the ground, just can get you those wins as fast as like a Nume deck or anything like that. Then we have Seriousmon. Seriousmon Gemamon deck, definitely good. It plays into the tier 3s pretty comfortably. Tier 2s, it can get some wins in some of it, but once you start getting to the tier 1s, it's just not doing it. Amphimon got one top last format. It's good. It definitely needs some more support. Like I said, it'll play into the tier 3s fine, but tier 2s, it can get into some of the field as well a little bit. Once you start seeing the tier 1s, it just falls apart. Darabi, just a dead deck. I'm sorry, you Darabi fans, they really done you dirty. They just don't know what they're doing with the deck. Purple base Metal Guru definitely suffers the same aspect. I mean, where is the Metal Guru on? Anywhere? Where did I put it? Metal Guru, Metal Guru, Metal Guru. Where's this Metal Guru? Definitely 3. It does some things, but doesn't do as well as it used to. But all in all, guys, though, I'm going to remove these. These don't matter as much because we got all the support. To be honest with you, let's bring a Magna here that if you guys can't afford the Magna X, you are definitely a tier 3 deck. It plays well into the tier 2 field. It can play a little bit into the tier 1s, but when you face your counterpart Magnamon X, oh my goodness, you are going to be crying. Rapid, the same thing, can just shut down you as well. It's going to be an upward battle, but all in all, though, for budget-wise, definitely tier 2. But taking a look, though, we have a pretty solid look at the meta here. I think all have potential here. I mean, like I said, Jessamon can go off, especially with Magna X in its evolution line now. It can do some shenanigans. But at the end of the day, though, it looks pretty solid of a tier list. I think tier 2 definitely has a lot going for it this set. Tier 1, we have plenty of going for. But all in all, guys, though, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you next one. Peace.